And with that, we're going to introduce our questions. We wanted to provide a little bit of context and framing for each of the questions, but we'll ask them in sort of an abbreviated format when we bring the candidates up in order to save time. So if you want to go to the first question.
Yes. So the first question is, rents in this city are high and rising. Most Harvard and MIT grad students are classified as rent burdened in that they pay more, a third of their income in rent. Some pay more than half. In 2020, the council adopted the 100% affordable housing overlay to help increase the supply of affordable units in the city. While promising, housing costs remain a major concern, and the access to affordable units remains a major concern. What's your plan to address the cost of housing in our city?
Our second topic is about policing and public safety. Earlier this year, Cambridge Police Department officers killed Syed Faisal, a UMass Boston undergraduate student who was having a mental health crisis and was carrying a knife. Many have viewed the police killing of a young man of color as emblematic of broader racial injustice in our city and its institutions. What would your approach be to preventing a tragedy like this from happening again? Time permitting, we also invite you to share other specific policies you would put forward that address policing, public safety, and/or racial justice in Cambridge.
Okay, so for the third question, candidates have been asked to sign the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge to show their support for creating a citywide network of protected bike lanes. Why have you chosen to sign or not to sign this pledge? And more broadly, what will you do to improve the state of cycling and transit in Cambridge?
Our fourth topic is about climate policy. Most students, as young people, are part of a generation that will face the brunt of climate impacts for most of our lives, and we recognize the unjust distribution of the impacts of climate change. For many of us, efforts to mitigate climate change are an important priority. Cambridge recently amended its Building Energy Use Disclosure Ordinance, or BUDO, to require commercial buildings over 100,000 square feet to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2035, one of the most ambitious local ordinances of its kind, and part of a broader set of local Green New Deal proposals. As the City Council considers how to further reduce carbon emissions, what policies, if any, would you support to decarbonize and electrify residential buildings and transit, and on what timeline to achieve net zero? Our fifth and final topic is about unions and workers' rights. Graduate student workers who perform research and teaching work at both Harvard and MIT are now unionized, and undergraduate workers and other academic workers at Harvard are now seeking to unionize as well. Over the course of forming our respective unions and negotiating our contracts, the City Council has passed resolutions publicly calling on our employers, MIT and Harvard, to agree to our contract proposals and stop using union busting tactics. Did you or would you have voted for these resolutions? And in what other concrete ways would you support workers' rights? And then we'll try to take one audience question, time permitting, for each candidate.
So yeah, just to reiterate, we'll do each of these 5 questions for each candidate, one candidate at a time, and you don't have to remember the exact wording. We'll prompt for each of them, leaving a minute and a half for each response. Okay.
With that, I think we can call up Jivan Sobrinho-Wheeler as our first candidate.
Awesome, cool. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for having me, and apologies I have to run a little bit. My name is Jivan Sobrinho-Wheeler. I am a renter. I am a union member and proud to be endorsed by UAW. I'm going to be, believe I'm going to be out of the picket line in Mansfield, UAW folks on Friday, folks who are going to do my day job. My commitment to a lot of the pieces I work on starts from the fact that I was raised by a single mom who was working multiple jobs and going back to school. We depended on affordable housing and childcare. We were renters most of the time I was growing up. I'm still a renter now. Just got a rent increase this year. Housing costs are super personal for me. In my current job, I work at the Working Families Party, working on passing progressive policy on housing, on childcare, on sustainability with the state and local government throughout New England. I served a term on the council previously in 2020 to 2021, and during that time, co-sponsored the affordable housing overlay that has created hundreds of new affordable homes. I was the lead sponsor on the cycling safety ordinance that was just referred to, that's added miles of protected bike lanes to Mass Ave, to Hampshire Street. We've got it to make it safer for so many people in Cambridge. We've seen so many folks take advantage of it. We've got to make sure that we complete the Cambridge Bike Network. I've introduced an ordinance to ban tear gas in Cambridge and to increase alternatives to public safety. We've got to keep pushing for these pieces as well. Just a few #1 votes shy in 2021. I'm really hopeful that a few more votes this year, we can get back on the council and keep pushing on all of these pieces in addition to this broadband and others.
Thank you very much. Let's go to our first question about housing.
Okay, yeah. As I mentioned in the intro, I really believe in the affordable housing overlay. I'm excited about the expansion this term. We've got to keep pushing on pieces though. I live in a triple-decker apartment on Brookline Street, just down the way on Mass Ave. It'd be illegal to build my apartment today because of setbacks and other pieces. It's not luxury by any means. 100 years old, I live with my partner and our cat. You can build more affordable housing like ours today. We've got to fix that. We've also got to work on tenant protections like rent stabilization. I'm super excited to see pieces moving forward on tenant opportunity to purchase. Cambridge Community Land Trust to create more affordable homeownership opportunities in Cambridge. There are so many folks who are teachers, social workers, grad students who are getting priced out of our city, and we've got to solve that. In my day job, I've worked on a mixed income social housing legislation. It's super common in other parts of the world, not really common in the United States. There's no reason that Cambridge, with all its resources, can't be leading on pieces like this. I'm super excited about that.
Thank you. Can you tell us about your approach to policing and public safety?
Yeah, I mentioned as a sponsor on legislation to ban tear gas. I think it's super important when you think about policing and public safety. This is an issue that as a local government, we have a ton of control and jurisdiction over. When you talk about things like the MBTA and other pieces, we can push on them, we've got to push on, but sometimes they're a little bit outside our control. Policing the entire budget, the entire set of what kind of force can be used and not used, what kind of weapons the police have or don't have, what kinds of surveillance technologies the police can use or not use, that's all under our power. And that's why it was super important for me to, as a Cambridge, as a place that could lead on it, to ban chemical weapons like tear gas. It's banned under the Geneva Conventions, under international treaty, I should say. Our police shouldn't have in this toolbox here, and we should be leading the way for other places like that. And moreover, we don't need police with guns responding to so many of the things that they're currently responding, right? We can have other folks, community members, trained community members, addressing things like substance use, like mental health pieces, like traffic enforcement, which is one of the things I worked on at the council. If your taillight is out, there's no reason you need a police officer with a gun responding to that. And that's why so many of the crises we've seen escalate, because we have someone with a gun responding to something they don't need to. And I'm really passionate about moving as much of that away as we can, because not everything has to be responded to by a person with a gun.
Thanks for that answer. Can you tell us about your approach to bike safety and public transit?
Yeah, it was the lead sponsor on the ordinance that added bike lanes to Mass Ave, to Hampshire Street, to Garden Street, to Brattle Street. There was no question in my mind about signing the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge. I started biking in Cambridge because it was the easiest way for me to get around. Right? I did not have a parking spot at home. I did not have a parking spot at work. I didn't start as a passionate cyclist. That was the only way I could really get from point A to point B, right? And I had lost part of 2 teeth in a bike crash doing that. There are so many folks in this same situation who are just trying to get around, just trying to get to work, to see their partner, to meet up with a friend, and it shouldn't have to risk their life to do it. Cambridge can absolutely lead in this area, and if I'm elected, I'm going to be one of the votes to keep it this year. The Safe and Safety Ordinance is on the ballot this fall. And on public transit, we've got to get local representation on the MBTA's board. The red line is a mess. The green line is not doing great. Trash fire in Harvard Square the other day. All of these things we can be preventing. We need to have more governance power. There's also things we can just do at the local level, things like signal fire, with things like bus lanes. We should be absolutely leading those specific areas as well.
Thank you. Can you tell us about your approach to decarbonization and the timeline that Cambridge should be considering for residential buildings and transit?
Yeah, this is a piece that the city absolutely should be leading on. The veto ordinance the council passed this term is a step in the right direction. I, in my day job, work with cities around New England. One of the things we're looking at is the Inflation Reduction Act has funding in it to help cities pay for things like solar panels, like heat pumps. Before you had to be, it was a tax credit, so you had to be like a bank or a corporation to take advantage of it. Now they're doing a direct pay provision, where they'll pay something like 60% of the funding directly for municipal government. So we should be putting solar panels on every public building, every library, every school. The funding is there. We've got to make sure we take advantage of it. We're working with cities like Providence on it right now, and would love to see Cambridge take advantage of it as well.
Thank you. Lastly, would you mind telling us whether you would support resolutions like the one the Cambridge City Council passed supporting our unions, and what other concrete ways you would support workers' rights?
Yeah, absolutely. I was on record supporting, I think, every pro-worker resolution when I was on the council. I introduced a number of them as a union member myself. It's super important and personal for me. I've walked picket lines with Harvard grad workers when they're on strike. When the coffee shop workers in Cambridge organized, I was there the first day and doing organizing with colleagues and so saying, hey, if you can stop by and just take a photo, show support. If this is the way we do it, I think there's formal ways we can support workers and unions on the council, and then there's informal ways of just being there, organizing, showing up when an employer sees that there are counselors on the picket line, that are counselors sponsoring resolutions. I think they're less likely to union bus because they know they're going to have to deal with the local government as a result, and so it's a piece that's important.
Thank you. With that, we'll open it up to one question from the audience, either in the room or on Zoom, if anyone has something they'd like to ask. All right.
All right.
If there are no questions, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adrienne Klein, and I am running for the first time for City Council. So I am a North Cambridge mom. I really care about housing because we live in an affordable housing unit. A lot of us share similar values we're going to talk about. So please go to my website, voteadrienne.com to check that out. But besides being a mom, which I think is really important in terms of a perspective bringing to that to the council and living in affordable housing, I really care about access to information. So for the past 3 years, I've been serving in a constituent services role for the city. So all day long, I hear from individuals about what they're looking for the city to provide to them, connecting with the services. So I have a really good understanding of what residents are looking for, and I have some strong ideas about what we can do as hopefully as a councilwoman to address that. And I would say that, I care about biking. I signed the bicycle safety pledge. I'll talk about that in a moment. I'll get to that later. So yeah, I think that I'll get to most of the important pieces in the specific questions.
So first, I guess the question about rents in the city and housing access.
Yeah, so this was the #1 issue that people were calling me about. I'm very much pro affordable housing. I think specifically with graduate student housing issues that we need to work with the universities to come up with solutions. There are so many groups in Cambridge that need to access housing, and the universities can play a role in addressing the issue for grad students. I support the affordable housing overlay, absolutely. And I also, similar to what Jivan said, support simplifying the zoning ordinance to allow multi-unit housing across Cambridge. I think that's a really important piece. Finally, I would really focus on revamping the inclusionary housing program. That's a program that I went through as a renter and as a homeowner. And there's a lot of room for improvement in interacting with the residents that are both applying to that program, but also are being served by that program. So I think there's a lot of room for us to improve support there.
And policing and public safety?
Absolutely. So my background is in transitional justice. So I was trained in forensics specifically forensic anthropology. So I have a lot of feelings about policing and justice in particular. In terms of just addressing what happened earlier this year, I specifically think that we need to do some police community reconciliation. There's a program that was started at John Jay, Police Reconciliation Program. And I would hope to bring that to Cambridge to work on addressing the systematic violence that police departments have caused. And so I think we need to just address that straight on and talk about that. It's not about individual officers, it's not about individual actions, but there is a history there that we need to address head on. And so I support an alternative response mechanism, support HEART 100%, and I'm glad that the city is looking into alternative models.
Thank you. Next question is about the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge and cycling and transportation more generally.
Yeah, so I signed the bicycle safety pledge. I biked to work every day of my pregnancy, which was really alarming, I think, to some of my colleagues to see me, until the day before my son was born on my bike. But I really care about bike safety. I live on Beach Street, which is a really dangerous spot and turn for bicyclists. I saw a bicyclist actually break the mirror off of a car the other day and keep going. So I really care about bicycle safety. I think that we need protected bike lanes. So I think we need to protect what we have. I think we need to do a study of how the rollout of the bicycle safety ordinance has gone and ensure that moving forward, we have a plan for citywide protected lanes and networks, and we're thinking about where to expand and thoughtfully do that with communication with business owners and neighbors. I think there's been a bit of a challenge with the implementation thus far, and that's what's causing the outcry from residents. But I think we can do a better job on communication and collaboration moving forward.
Thank you. The fourth question was about climate policy for the city.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say that I have the least background, like the least amount of experience in climate policy of any of the issues that are really relevant. Just being a parent, I care about the climate because I want to ensure that the world that I'm leaving for my son is that he has the opportunities that I had in terms of, access to the environment, clean water, everything like that. So I think that VUDO is a really important first step, and that I support the Green Deal. I think we need to focus on the creation of those green jobs, pathways for those jobs here in Cambridge. So looking at whether the university can help with that, or some of our programs like Justice Start, which already have some of the training programs that operate for helping people get into like tech jobs, for example, that we can be supporting green jobs through that. And it's an area that I certainly will be looking to learn more about and defer to some of the expertise on our city staff to address.
Thank you. The fifth and final question is about unions and workers' rights.
Yeah, so I was part of a union in New York, DC 37, when I worked for New York City Health and Hospital. So I very much support unions. Right now, I think a big issue is the teacher contracts coming in Cambridge. So I said I'm a teacher, and we need to settle that contract. I support union jobs, and I think that we need to, I support what the council did, for example, in the ordinances to support the graduate students unionizing. And I think that the council, like Jivan said, can show up both with effective policy orders and by being present in the situations for people who are trying to unionize in the city.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? We have a minute or so left. Anyone online? No? Yes.
Thank you so much for telling us about your experience and background in forensic anthropology. I'm interested if you can talk more about conflict, harm, and creating safe communities within our city. Want to hear a little bit more about the police reconciliation program that you're thinking about, or like what that would look like in practice, or things like transformative justice or supportive justice and circles within the city, whether that's within the government or beyond, or perhaps outside of the government, community-based violence interrupters, or how we're trying to help people desist from crime after incarceration. Just want to hear more from you on community safety and what that looks like.
Absolutely. So I work for the National Network for Safe Communities, which specifically focuses on focused deterrence. So essentially, if you have a law and people break it and get away with it a lot of the time, then it's not an effective deterrence. And so in order to have effective deterrence, you have to have a response every time that's consistent. So in that sense, I think that, for example, when we talk about bicyclists that are breaking the rules, it's because there's not a deterrent. There's not an effective deterrent there. There's ways that we can have deterrence, but they don't need to be punitive either. So I would stay away from punitive enforcement, and there's positive deterrence. I think that there's absolutely room for there to be circles outside of the government. I think that the police reconciliation program that I'm talking about is complete. It's through the National Network for Safe Communities. It essentially is conversations between the community and police officers, and it involves some training for police officers as well. I don't think that there's a need for violence interrupters here in Cambridge. I'm saying that having worked in cities across the world on issues that we were trying to address with focus deterrence, like in El Salvador and Mexico, so looking at cartel and gang violence, as well as kind of more local level violence in Fort Myers or Tennessee.
I'm sorry to interrupt. For the sake of time, we can move on, but thank you for your answer. All right.
Okay, hi, I'm Zusy. Many people know me as the Magazine Beach Lady because I've been leading the effort to revitalize Magazine Beach Park. I didn't have anything done it, but it's fantastic. It's Cambridge's second largest park along the river. I've been working on that for 12 years as a volunteer, leading Magazine Beach Partners. I co-initiated the restoration of St. Augustine's African Orthodox Church. This is an Afro-Caribbean church in Cambridgeport, which we're almost completed with that project. That'll be completed this fall. I've done a million other projects over the last 25 years. I've been living in Cambridgeport for 28 years. So I'm known for getting things done. That is my slogan. Zusy gets things done. I'm not an obvious politician and not a comfortable speaker, as a matter of fact, but I am very good at collaborating, persisting, listening, connecting the dots. I'm very goal-oriented and working. I bring people together to accomplish things. And so that is what I'm hoping to do as a city councilor. I've been effective in doing it in my small little world of Cambridgeport, and I think I'm ready to unleash my energy and my experience on working to address larger issues like transportation, climate change, and affordable housing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, that's all the time we have for the introduction.
Okay.
Is it okay if we move on to the first topic? Thank
Let's
you.
do it.
Great. So our first question is about housing. Can you tell us about how you would expand beyond the affordable housing overlay in terms of housing policy?
Yes. I just wanted to go back for 1 second and say that I realize the cost of living in Cambridge is 215% higher than the national average, and our housing costs are 215% higher. So 74% higher for cost of living and 215% higher for cost of housing. Now that's extraordinary, and it wasn't like that when I first came to Cambridge, or in the Boston area when I was about 28. And also I have a son that's 25, almost 26, and I'm very aware the world has changed, and I feel like our biggest problem to solve is figuring out we had the opportunity, we could come to Cambridge, we could come to Boston. I could make $17,000 a year as a research assistant at the MFA, and I could live a great life, because my rent was $450 or $625. But you guys don't have that opportunity. So I am, now a single bedroom rents for about $3,500 a month. So I'm committed to really working to solve this problem. I don't think the affordable housing overlay is the answer. I think that is what someone has said, a crude tool. I think we need to find more funding for housing, maybe from transfer taxes, from windfall taxes when we upzone. I think we need to expand housing, develop more auxiliary units, help to rezone so there can be apartments and existing houses. I think there are other ways that we can solve this problem.
Okay, thank you. Our second question is about policing and public safety. Can you comment on how you would address this issue?
So it was in my own neighborhood in Cambridgeport where Saeed Faisal died. I think that was obviously a very unfortunate incident. But I do think that if he had stayed in his house, and it would have been a private issue, but I feel like once he jumped out the window and neighbors reported concern about someone with a long knife, I think that was a community safety issue. So I think it was appropriate for the police to respond. Clearly something went wrong, and that was unfortunate. I feel as if overall our police does good work. They actually are nationally renowned. I know we hear about how bad policemen are all over this country, but actually our police do pretty good work. And there is this new community safety department that is working on resolving issues without force. There are social workers now on the police department staff. I think our police commissioner, Christine Ello, is really trying to move policing in the right direction. And I think we need to continue to work with her and to encourage the police in that direction.
Thanks.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah, am I done with that?
You have a few more seconds.
Well, I was just going to say, I first got involved in civic activity in Cambridgeport because there was a serial rapist working in my neighborhood, breaking into first floor apartments. So working with the Cambridge Police Department, I developed a crime watch group, and working with them, we were able to, remove the rapist from the neighborhood. So we do need police. It all depends upon, we have to think about how they work within the community.
Thanks for your answer. Our next question is about the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge and about bike safety in transit.
I am a cyclist. My husband cycles to work most days. My son used to cycle to the high school and used to cycle with him to middle school. It's absolutely essential that we have safe bicycle lanes. I have not signed the pledge for two reasons. One, on principle. I don't think that new candidates, we're called challengers, should be forced to commit to a position before we're on the council. We're going to learn a lot more once we're on the council, as we're briefed by community departments. But also, I feel like I feel much safer in a separated bike lane, and I'm thrilled to see the network expanding all over the place. So I think it's a fabulous thing, and I commend the Bicycle Safety Committee for advocating for, without the bicycle safety ordinance, we wouldn't have improvements in the bike lane. So I applaud them. I worry about the timeline. I don't think we need to extend it by 3 years or 5 years, but I think for different parcels of the rollout, if the city needs another 3 months or 6 months to do it well, I think we need to give them that time, because otherwise there'll just be backlash. It's in the best interest of cyclists for it to be done well, and to really engage retailers in the community in solving things.
Thanks for your answer. Our next question is about climate policy and what you see as the timeline for decarbonization of buildings and transit.
Here, I'm really thrilled and proud to live in the city of Cambridge because, we were an early green community, one of the first in Cambridge. The first in Massachusetts. And by 2025, our municipal emissions will be reduced by 71% of the 2008 levels. So we've really been working hard on reducing emissions from buildings, which are the greatest place that we produce emissions. I think we need to look into more community geothermal, and I'm really excited that HEAT, which is a Cambridge nonprofit, has been doing a pilot project in Framingham that they're trying to bring to Cambridge. And I was talking to Audrey Schulman about, who leads HEAT, about the most effective way we can really move forward with energy issues in Cambridge. And she was saying we need to do an integrated energy planning. And I am so thankful that MIT and Harvard are in our communities and all you brilliant graduate students. And I think you can help us in moving forward with solutions that will really help us to reduce our carbon emissions. I think we're heading in the right direction. I worry about Guido because I worry that, again, the timeline is too tight. I mean, we're in a climate emergency, but if Eversource can't even provide the electricity by 2035, you know, should we demand that everything is electrified by 2035? That's my concern with Guido.
Our next question is about unions and workers' rights. Would you support resolutions supporting workers' contract demands, and in what other ways would you support workers' rights?
This is an issue I haven't thought about. So I promise that if I'm elected to the council, I will think much more about this issue.
Thank you. Was there anything else you'd like to say about that? Sorry, I just
No,
wanted
not
to take your
about
time.
that.
Okay.
No.
So we have a question on Zoom. Victoria asks, what message are you sending to people with mental health issues when you say that this is an unfortunate incident when you refer to the police brutality of Faisal, that they make their mental health issues limited to their private life? Would you like to respond to that?
What I think I really mean is, so when I've talked to Commissioner Ello, and I know the Cambridge Police is really focusing on proactive measures and preemptive measures. They're really trying to work with groups that are at risk ahead of time. And I think one of the things that Cambridge is fantastic at is anticipating need and providing services. We provide extraordinary services to our community. And so I think they're really trying to provide, they're trying to stop the problems before they escalate or manifest themselves. So that's where I think we need to focus our attention. We need to provide mental health services. I know we have the Cambridge Health Alliance, which is absolutely extraordinary. Our Cambridge Hospital is absolutely extraordinary. And we need to continue to provide mental health services as broadly as we can.
All right, thank you so much for your answers. And with that, we will bring up Dan Totten.
Hi, should I start?
Yes, you can go
All
ahead
right,
and
and please stop me because I will not stop my own.
Okay.
My name is Dan Totten. I'm a queer renter from Central Square. Actually, earlier today, I was dealing with a leak in my downstairs bathroom. It was very scary because we had to call the landlord. And it's probably going to cost a lot of money to replace that leak, and my rent might go up next spring. So that's what I was dealing with today. I am running to continue the progress of Councilor Zondervan, who I worked for 6 years. We got a lot done. I'm really proud of the work that we did on affordable housing, on climate justice, on bike safety, all of it. We're going to talk about it. Couple things that aren't mentioned in the questions that I want to address. Universal after-school care, we must do it. The city turned away 500 families last year, including 100 low-income families. As a wealthy city like us, how can we look low-income families in the eye and say that we turned them away? I did, because I've been knocking on their doors and I've been hearing their stories. We can't do it anymore. We have to pay for it. And secondly, yeah, I guess I'll say homelessness for the next question, but really passionate about addressing homelessness, and we need permanent supportive housing because when you combine housing with support, it's proven to work.
Thank you very much. And our next question is in fact about housing. Can you tell us how you would build on the affordable housing overlay and other housing policies?
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to be clear that I helped draft the amendments to the affordable housing overlay that the council was about to pass. I'm really proud of that, working with Councilor Azeem and Councilor McGovern and others. And, you know, I think the way I want to move forward is to write a student housing overlay, which functions very similarly to the affordable housing overlay, but allows on university-owned land, allows for taller and denser housing, provided that it is set aside for students and that it is subsidized. And the details of that have to be worked out, but I'm the only candidate that's proposing something like that. And the key is to take away the barriers in terms of getting taller and denser housing in exchange for what we want. And, you know, just on homelessness, I talked about the study that said that, you know, there is a study in Denver, they did this thing where they built a lot of permanent supportive housing, like 350 units, and they offered on-site support in combination with the housing. And when they did that, 81% of the people they placed in those 350 whatever units stayed in their unit for 3 years or more. If we want to get people off the street in Central and Harvard Square, we need to put our money where our mouth is and get people off the street by providing supportive housing.
Thank you for your answer. Our next question is about policing and public safety.
Yes, so, you know, I stood with Pasquarello family the night after he was murdered by the police. And I think that the answer is abolition. We have to move away from racist carceral systems and towards models of true support and true care for people who are feeling vulnerable. Earlier this summer, I got called down to the Central Court Library where somebody unhoused was taking refuge from the rain underneath the overhang. And he called me because there were 8 cops and a garbage truck there. And I showed up and I de-escalated the situation. I got the cops to back off. I got them to drive their garbage truck away. Christine Elo, which is how you say her name, apologized to me personally the next day for bringing a garbage truck to that site. We can't reform a broken system. We have to move away towards transformative models of care like Cambridge Heart, which is community-led, community-run by women of color who grew up in this city, and they deserve a chance to respond to 911 calls, low-level 911 calls, like the person in the vestibule.
Thank you for your answer. Our next question is about the bike safety pledge and transit.
Yeah, so I signed the pledge because I don't want my friends to die or get hurt. Straight up. Like, I'm sorry, like there have been some inconveniences, I'm sorry, right? But like, straight up, like if you follow the Crashes Twitter account, every day there's a new tweet. It comes up and it's like, there was a crash between a car and a cyclist, the car was at fault, right? Like, this is not, we're not making this up, it's not a hidden problem. Like, I don't want to wake up one day and find that a friend is hurt or killed. And so that's why I signed the pledge. It's really simple. And I do want to say that you know, I've been biking until this summer. I started blue biking around the city and I love it. It's like so amazing. And I actually feel safe going to places like Harvard and Porter Square from Central, going to therapy down in Mount Auburn on the Brattle Street bike lane, right? So when people complain about the Brattle Street bike lane, I'm like, that's what keeps me safe when I'm going to therapy every Tuesday morning, right? So like, I just want to be real about that. Like, I'm actually somebody who is not a professional cyclist, but like out there on the streets and like trying really hard to just be safe. And it's hard that we have to have a whole election about safety. So I wish that we could just move on from it, but we can't because there's people who feel inconvenienced and that's just the reality. So I hope you all vote for people who support the bike lanes.
Thank you. Our next question is about climate policy and the timeline for decarbonizing buildings and transit.
Yes, so I was really proud to have worked with a number of you on passing the Green New Deal for Cambridge, which is the most ambitious and the strongest climate legislation in the whole country of any municipality in the whole country. It's 15 years faster than Boston, and that is the compromise. 2035 is the compromise, right? We have to be clear about that, and that's a compromise that everybody came to. The students, the developers, and most of the counselors supported this compromise were there, but it was the compromise, right? It's not unreasonable. Eversource can provide the electricity, so I just want to correct that, because they've never said they couldn't, and in fact, they said that they could. In terms of residential and transit, again, 2035 is the compromise. I would love to move even faster. And if we really want to address our transit emissions, we have to reduce the number of cars in the city. Just being honest about that, that's the greatest way we have an impact. MBTA is, tied up in the state, and we can't do much there. But if we reduce the amount of cars, there's a lot of ways we could do that. We might need some sort of road diet ordinance that functions similarly to the cycling safety ordinance to actually put streets on road diets and make them safer for pedestrians and everybody else. There's more to it than just building protected bike lanes.
Thank you. Our final question is about supporting unions and workers' rights.
Yes, so I proudly stand with the unions. I can remember before the Harvard and MIT grad student unions existed. I can remember being at a party and somebody whispering in my ear that weather is happening, and then I can remember the vote. I was there every part of the way as Councilor Zondervan's aide, drafting the resolutions and putting them forward and making sure that students knew when to show up and how to speak at public comment and standing with you on the picket lines and everything. I've been there and I'll continue to be there. I was surprised when the resolution supporting the MIT grad students was not unanimous earlier this summer. I think it's frustrating to be in a city where that kind of resolution wouldn't be unanimous, or where we would have most of the city council and almost all of the school committee be too afraid to stand up with the teachers union when they had to go back to work without a strike. So I proudly stand with the teachers union. I just want to be clear about that. I think we should settle the contract. And I stand with any other union that wants to settle their contract. And I will be just very clear that my office will always stand with union members over management. And I will choose a side and will always be the union members.
Thanks for your answers. We will take one question from the audience if anyone has one. All right.
I think
harm reduction policies and for like what you're envisioning there. I think I just wasn't really sure on the details, like what kind of implementations you're envisioning.
Yeah, totally. So sort of in addition to the cycling safety ordinance, which of course is one such policy, I was sort of suggesting that maybe we could have a similar ordinance that looked at traffic calming measures, try to think about a network around the city where we wanted to focus on traffic calming measures and kind of require that the city move in that direction as well. It doesn't take a major street redesign to get these things done. If you look in New York City is making these interventions all the time, right? We can do it. And then the other thing is we have to raise the parking permit fees. This is something that Councilor Donovan proposed multiple times. The council voted it down. $25 a year to park on the street is, kind of a joke. And I think we need to double that. And then we use that money to implement the traffic calming measures. And when people start to see the results of that investment, I think it will help more people become open to moving in that direction.
Thanks so much for your answers. Thank you.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Federico Muchnik. I am a teacher, filmmaker, longtime Cambridgian. I was born in Europe, came here when I was 5. I have spent, as I say, most of my life here in Cambridge. I am in this fight to see how we can unify around certain policy issues that I happen to find a little disturbing, and so do many of the voters that I've been speaking with. My background, as I say, is as a filmmaker and teacher, but a while ago I was asked to make a film about a story taking place at 21 Malden Square, and it was through telling that story that I became interested in this particular job. And I represented a grassroots organization that needed their story told, and we were able to effectuate some changes and some corrections that I felt are, how can I put it, right, good, and in my opinion, enhance and to a certain degree preserve a certain character to the city that I have spent my whole life in, and that we all, many of us have spent our lives in. So, just that by way of introduction, I would say my platform and my bio is at federicoforcouncil.net. There's a lot more information on there. My films are on that site. My positions are on that site as well, and I urge you to take
I'm sorry to break
phone
in.
call on your way out. Yes, shoot,
Sorry, that's as much time as we have for introductions. Thank you.
fire away.
So our first question is about housing and how you would approach expanding on the affordable housing overlay and other housing policies.
So in 90 seconds.
Yes, please.
I am in principle in favor of quality, affordable public housing. I am against 12 and 15-story buildings in Cambridge, and I can explain why. I believe in something called mid-rise gentle density construction. And I believe that we need to put the public before the developers. I believe that we can have what I call staggered housing. Let's say you've got a 7-story building on the avenue and you work your way back, let's say 100 feet into a side street and move down X number of stories so that by the time you get X number of feet in, you have something that's more in line with the canopy and with the neighborhood. I will really do whatever I can to stop a 12-story building next to a 2-story business. Moreover, I am skeptical of those who say that we are only talking about 3 to 5 buildings over a 10-year period. I just have to cast a jaundiced eye on those kinds of statements. And I think that the folks that authored the Amendment 2.0 weren't necessarily qualified the way, let's say, somebody like outgoing Councilor Carlone is qualified, who is an urban planner and an architect. Cut me off.
And that's all the time we have for this question. Our next topic is about policing and public safety. If you could tell us about your stances on that.
Yes. So I was really glad to see after George Floyd, when the city, I don't know who, but Bravo, if you're in the room, asked the police department to take pictures of all its weapons of mass, some serious military grade weaponry, and there were pictures that were published. I was like, wow, this is in our police department. That's pretty impressive, and I like that transparency. I happen to agree with folks who talk about HEART as being a great program. I call it, put a social worker in a car with a cop and have that person handle low level. But what came back was, we're not sure the police want a social worker in the car, hence HEART, which the little I know about it, it sounds great. It sounds like a fantastic program. So public safety, I would say I have no major objections to what I'm seeing. I did have another thought, but it escapes me now.
All right. Well, thank you for your answers. So our next question is about the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge and how you would approach transit.
So I did not sign the pledge, and my allegiance as councilor would be first and foremost to the city. Just because I don't sign the pledge, it doesn't mean I'm anti-biking. I bike here tonight. I bike everywhere. I biked through Cambridge my whole life. Without a helmet at times and without reins. I think that bike lanes are here to stay. I think they should be reinforced on certain venues. I'm not wild about what happened on Garden Street, but and I don't think I believe, if my information is correct, that the bus lanes were something that was folded into the bike lane bill, for lack of a better term. And I'm not sure that we need bus lanes. In fact, one item on my platform involves, I know, look, the MBTA is a monopoly, and there's nothing we can do about these big buses, but we should do a pilot program with half-size electric buses, like in Amsterdam, that are agile, And we should double the fleet, and the buses should be able to move freely from, let's say, Central Square up to Airway. And it should be a pilot program with, let's say, 6 buses. And you watch people coming back to mass transit. They will come back in droves. I don't know how to deal with the MBTA. There are people in this room who are better qualified to sit down with the MBTA, but half-size electric buses that are more agile will make our streets less of an obstacle course.
Let's move on to our next question, please. Thank you. Our next question is about climate policy. What would be the timeline you would pursue for decarbonizing buildings and transit?
I leave the timeline to the experts, and they are out there. I would give you a better answer once I drill down into what's actually feasible versus what's not feasible. But I will tell you this: 21 of the 25 most polluting buildings in Cambridge belong to MIT, is my understanding. And MIT has the intellectual knowledge and the scientific knowledge, ironically, to actually solve the problem of these polluting buildings. So why don't we sit down, the R&D folks at MIT with the physical plant folks at MIT, and say, look, 21 of your 25 buildings are the most polluting. What are we going to do about it? What can we do about that? And then get them to say, okay, so that's plan A, that's one plan. The other thing is the 3 top quote unquote things that individuals can do, according to the Union for Concerned Scientists, UCS. I made a documentary with them with Jimmy Tingle, actually 10 years ago, called Jimmy Tingle Saves the Planet. It was a lot of fun. Shorter commutes, eat less meat, maybe 1 burger a week instead of 3, and don't heat your McMansions. Localize your heating. Find a new way to heat. If people are sensitized to those 3 things and can contribute, we can do stuff. We can reduce our carbon footprint. You're going to cut me off, or do I have 1 more minute?
Sorry, we're done with that
We're
question.
moving along.
Yes, please. Thank you for your answer. For our last question, we'd like to ask about the resolutions supporting unions and what you would do to support workers' rights.
Yeah, I'm a union guy through and through. If I had ever been in a job that offered a union, I would have taken it. I've always been a freelance filmmaker. We don't really have a corporate videography doesn't have a union. But I will tell you this: I have a daughter, Layla. She lives in Columbus, Ohio. She's a curatorial assistant at the Wexner Center for the Arts. She's one of the folks that got me into this battle, into this story. She's unionizing her job. She calls me and she talks to me about what she's doing to get employees to sort of band together and unionize. And it's a fascinating, she says, clips. It's a fascinating thing to see because there are people in her organogram who are upstairs who are frankly they've been there for 25 years and they're not moving. They have no interest in it. And this makes it very hard for people to rise. And I think a union can allow for folks to I wouldn't say gently ask people gently to move on, but it can help bring new voices to an organization. Don't get me started on union movies. Norma Ray, Blue Collar, okay, wonderful stuff. Inspiring films for sure. So,
thanks for your answer. We have a question from someone on Zoom, who says to ask you. This is an interesting question. To ask you if being young on city council is an advantage or a disadvantage. I'm not sure where that's.
It's a quote Harrison Ford. It's not the years, it's the mileage. You don't have to be young. You just have to be smart. You have to know what you're saying and doing. I think young folks, obviously bring a lot of new ideas, but there's a brain trust here of really brilliant people. And I don't think age is a factor, I think that some people should know when to bow out, like Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein, but now we're going national here on a rather local story. I don't know, does that answer it?
I won't speak for the question asker, but that sounds like an answer to me. Thank you so much for your responses. We really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you.
And next up, we'll have Burhan Azeem. Right, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, Counselor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Burhan Azeem. I'm a Cambridge City Councilor. I was the youngest city councilor that's ever served in the city, although maybe I will have me beat next year. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. I guess a little bit of my journey. I was born in Pakistan. I immigrated to the US. And then I was very lucky later on in life to get a full scholarship to MIT. And then I was really involved in that time around getting students registered and active in voting. I was a big part of, getting MIT Vote Live and getting people really energetic and active. And I'm happy to say we like almost doubled or tripled student turnout in all those years, especially around MIT campus. I was then, graduated MIT. I worked at the MIT. I worked at a public care company and really tried to focus on giving back to my community. And then ran for city council twice actually, after losing the first time by like 100-ish votes. And then won the second time around. And now I get to be your city councilor. My real passion is housing policy. I founded an organization called Abundant Housing MA, which does housing policy at the state level and passed a lot of really great legislation and is working on even more, which I'm really excited about. And I was the lead sponsor this term on the affordable housing overlay, which I wrote with Dan and Councilor McGovern and many others who were very supportive. And so I'm really excited to be here, really happy to talk about all the great work that we've done, and hopefully get a chance to continue doing it afterwards.
Thank you. I've been hugging the questions, so I'm gonna let Glenn ask you the questions this time.
Great. So the next, I'm sorry, wait, that was one?
That was intro.
Um,
That's all right.
sorry, I was managing Zoom stuff.
I covered a lot.
So the first question is about rent and housing.
Great. So I'll take a step back and just talk a little bit about the problem, although I'm sure you guys feel it, right? Especially for young people, it's that the city has become so extremely expensive, right? I myself last year was renting a new apartment, and it's so hard to find because our vacancy rate is so low, and so it can be hard to even find an apartment. 0.5% vacancy rate. That meant in the city of 50,000 units, but 250 were free. And during that time, a lot of them were, homes that were for sale, and I'm not in a position to buy a home. And a lot of the bedrooms were illegal apartments, and going through that journey and seeing all these illegal apartments or things with infestations, leaky roofs, and all of a sudden when they're renting it out to the city council, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, we're totally gonna fix this, or this was a problem. And so there's a lot of problems around the housing affordability in our city. And I think it's especially bad for young people, and especially even worse for PhD students, right? On two fronts. One is that, imagine the story, like you being someone who's young, really excited into math or literature or whatever your forte is, working really hard to get into the best university, right? And then doing really well enough to get a PhD program into MIT or Harvard, right? And realizing you're going to spend 6-7 years giving up a higher salary to really dedicate yourself to academia. And then spending most of your 20s paying 50% of your income in rent, especially when Harvard controls their own buildings and the rent that they charge, and they pay your PhD salary. It's a little bit insane.
Thank you. Thank you for the response. We have to move on to the next question, which is about policing and public safety.
Absolutely, thank you. And so for policing, it's very personal, right? Like I moved here right after 9/11 in New York and Staten Island, and that was a very difficult time. When I turned 16, I was so excited to drive, which is a documented people who know me today. But I got my license on January 2nd. I was born on January 1st. The day after I turned 16, I was so excited. And then just kept getting pulled over time and time again. And then I lived in Staten Island, and not too far from my dad's deli is where Eric Garner was killed. And it was a lot of really shocking, traumatic moments at that time. Since that I don't drive now, I bike around the city. It's really hard. And I think the number one focus I have is trying to reduce interactions with the police. You don't need a police officer to do every, speeding call. So I let out Bill this term around having automatic enforcement, around having speed cameras. You don't need police officers to answer every 911 call. And so we worked on having both the community safety department and HART answer 911 calls that are appropriate. And I think that, you just be, overuse police in a lot of situations, and I think reducing interactions can have a really, really positive effect. And it just makes you feel calmer. You don't have to be stressed in every interaction of how badly things go wrong.
Great, thank you so much. Next question is about the bike safety pledge and cycling and transportation more generally.
So I signed the bike safety pledge. I guess I'll take it in this way, transit in terms of the T, biking, and then bus. So let's say you go to MIT because you're cross-registered for classes from Harvard, or you're part of the HST program or things like that, right? What are your options in the city? You could take the red line from Harvard to Kendall. But the red line has been going really, really slowly, right? It can now take almost half an hour to go 2 stops. It's faster to walk. And I think a lot of that is to focus on is, a lot of people use the excuse that the MBTA belongs to the state, and it does, and that really does limit our powers. But, I was a part of a large conversation this time around advocacy to get Boston a seat on the MBTA board. And I think that there's willingness in the State House to expand that control to allow 1 or 2 more seats to belong to the municipalities. And I think that gives us a lot of leverage because, the municipalities are really, have the people who really care about the MBTA and day-to-day usage. And a lot of other things that we can do to improve the red line as well. And then let's say, the red line isn't working, so you want to go down to your class at MIT. The most direct and easy way is to bike down Mass Ave. And I think that having safe, protected bike lanes is really, really important. And we talked about the bus lanes before, but I think that bus lanes are really important because they make the buses faster, such as the one bus you could also take. But also, by adding bus lanes, the MBTA actually rewards us by more service. So the Better Bus Project, which I mentioned the transportation project or gave feedback on, we're going to get 35% increase in service, and no small part because the MBTA is thanking us for all the bus lanes that we added across the city.
Great, thanks for the response. So now moving on to the city's climate policy.
Yes, so I think we passed, the most aggressive climate policy in the country this term in terms of Cueto and in terms of getting to net zero for large commercial buildings by 2035. I supported, 5-4 vote getting to 2035 for Cueto. And then I, did also vote to remove rental units from Cueto, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit more. I supported it because, I actually do strongly believe that we need to get all housing to net zero as quickly as possible. I had a problem once, condos were taken out and homeowners were exempted from Cueto, but then we were only going to charge rental, which is something that really bothers me because it feels like, we don't treat all housing the same, except the renters who have to pay. But I mentioned just at that meeting that I'd be really excited to do something as long as it includes both homeowners and rental units together in terms of getting to net zero. And I think the biggest thing going forward after that is transportation emissions and how we can get more buses, more, mass transit in terms of getting to net zero and improving that and reducing our transportation emissions as well.
Great, thanks. The 5th and final question is about unions and workers' rights.
This is a very exciting one for me. I was a lead sponsor on a lot of these bills. My friends and I, when we came to MIT, were part of the original class who helped organize the MIT Graduate Student Union. And I never was there for the actual union vote, but I was really, really excited to be a part of that and to support graduate student unions throughout all of that. I was endorsed by the UAW and really excited about the contract that Harvard graduate students negotiated and about the recent win by the MIT Graduate Student Union. My partner is a PhD student, and we spent a lot of the last few weeks organizing the people at Northeastern and her PhD fellow, and I'm really excited that they won their unionization vote with a 94 percentile. I'm really, really excited by the support we've had for unions. My mom worked at Dunkin' Donuts almost her whole life until 3 years ago. After 14 years of working there, union school bus attendant is actually on strike right now. And so I'm very supportive of unions and really excited about where we are.
Great, thank you. Are there any audience questions? Yes.
I was a debater in high school. I know how hard it is to do something in 90 seconds. And I want to ask you more about specific housing policies surrounding affordable housing that you worked on and that you want to continue working.
Yes, absolutely. So I wrote the amendments around the affordable housing overlay, which I was really, really excited about and hopefully will pass in a few weeks. I also wrote and did a large part with, Dan and Councilor McGovern around removing parking minimums this term. I'd be really excited about legalizing or ending exclusionary zoning, legalizing triple deckers throughout the city, and also looking into social housing and rezoning campuses to allow more housing there. And then I guess the final call to action is instead of, I obviously would love your vote, but I just really wanted to say, youth turnout has been a really, really hard fight. And so for all of you guys to get your friends to vote, to really, really focus, since 2017, we've seen a huge spike in youth turnout, and that's something we can't take for granted.
Thank you. And thank you, Counselor, for answering these questions. I think we're actually almost on time, which is pretty exciting. So next up, we have Vernon Walker.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elephant Happy and Hippopotamus, glad to be here today to talk about some very important issues. So my name is Vernon Walker, and I'm a climate advocate, a minister, social justice advocate, and essentially, and originally, I grew up in Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, in a public housing. So I grew up in a public housing development called Mill Creek. Some of you may not be familiar with it, but if you Google Lake Street Massacre, you will see that neighborhood had the largest mass killing, 10 people killed in December of 2000 in a crack house. So that was the neighborhood that I grew up in. And essentially education was the way out for me in terms of undergrad and coming up here to Boston to go to Boston University to do my first master's, currently doing my second master's in public policy at Tufts University. So I'm glad to be here with some other students and others to really talk about these pressing issues. And if you want to know about some other issues, I know we'll tackle it, please do check out my website, votevernon.org.
Thank you. Sorry, am I asking or are you asking?
I can handle it, yeah. Great, well, thank you. The first question is about rent and housing in the city.
We know that we are in a housing crisis. We know Cambridge is about 6 square miles, and we know that Black and brown folks disproportionately are harmed by housing injustice. I think we should try to take additional measures to create affordable housing. Not only, I'm a supporter of the housing overlay. I'm also supportive of trying a municipal voucher to be able to help subsidize market rate rent. I'm also supportive of the university thinking about how the university can house its graduate students because sometimes as a graduate student, oftentimes it's very hard to rub two nickels together, particularly if you don't have a full-time job outside of school. So I think we need to also end exclusionary zoning. And we need to begin to take additional measures to ensure our city is livable for people who want to live here.
Thank you. The next question is about policing and public safety.
Yes, thank you for that. So we know that communities of color have had historic distrust with police. Growing up in West Philadelphia, I saw police, I was 10 years old, I saw police pull over a Black man and search him illegally and treat him and mishandle him unjustly. Here in Cambridge, I've door knocked in the port, I've talked to Black and brown residents, and we know that this is an issue. We know that in order to create more safety, I think we need to have additional conversations between underserved communities and policing. I'm also against the militarization of the police. I sit on the board at the Mass Peace Action, and the Mass Peace Action is a Massachusetts organization that is not only promoting a demilitarization of local police, but also promoting peace in the world. So I think we need to demilitarize our police. I think we need to support organizations like HEART. I've met with the leadership and told them that I would be supportive of the work they're doing because they have relationships with marginalized folks. And because they have the safety and the trust. So I think we need to ensure that organization has funding to be able to build the relationship to those, particularly who those are in crisis. And I think we need body cameras. I think police officers here should have body cameras, and I think the body cameras will tell a different story, will tell a story about what happened to the young man that was killed earlier this year.
Thank you for that response. The next question is about the bike safety pledge and cycling and transportation.
Yes, so I signed the bicycle pledge because I think cyclists need to be safe. I think pedestrians need to be safe. Thank you. I think motorists need to be safe. Last week I saw on Mass Ave right near the Central Square fire station, I saw a pregnant woman, and some of y'all may have read this in the Cambridge Day, a pregnant woman's bike, and I got some pictures on my phone. I came after she was hit, and she was screaming and she was in distress because she got hit. I think we need to think of a way to create safer streets for our motorists, for our cyclists, for our pedestrians. And I'm also supportive of on-demand transit. And I know some people in some communities are not in favor of bike lanes, but I think the city should invest in a mobile on-demand transit that operates similar to Lyft and Uber to be able to help folks, particularly elderly folks, low-income folks, et cetera, be able to get to their destinations in the city, such as supermarket and doctor's office, et cetera.
Great, thank you. The fourth question is about the city's climate policy.
Oh, yes, climate. So I'm currently the director of organization. I'm currently the climate justice director at Clean Water Action. And I work on state policy around air quality monitoring and also the siting reform bill. But before I got to Clean Water Action, I was director of the Communities Responding to Extreme Weather, which is an organization right around the corner, whose office is right on Mount Auburn Street in the Democracy Center. And their focus is to help prepare folks for extreme weather, more flooding, more heat. And we know that Cambridge will experience more heat, more flooding. I advocate that we push for policies that will provide education, particularly those education across the city, but for those who are in urban heat islands such as North Cambridge and the Port, because we know that the effects of extreme weather is not disappearing. So while I think we also should have mitigation efforts like UDO, and I'm supportive of it, it's an ambitious climate policy, I think we also need to support resilience efforts and ensuring that the city is distributing cooling kits in partnership with the public health department. I also think that we need to put some meat on the bones around the green jobs ordinance. I know that passed earlier this year. I think we should help train our young people for these green jobs that will become more and more available. And we also center Black and brown folks who historically have been left behind. So I think that the city could also add more funding to the forest sprint, the urban forest sprint, where we know that planting trees is important, but we also know that watering trees is important. And I think we need to bolster that program where neighbors are motivated and incentivized to water trees. We're considering the incoming droughts that we will face because of climate change.
Thank you. The fifth and final question is about unions and workers' rights.
Oh, yes, I stand in solidarity with unions and workers. I recently got endorsed by UAW, got endorsed by the MNA. We have a new endorsement that we're going to make public by the SEIU 509. So for me, workers' rights is very important. In fact, I was a union worker. I was part of 1199C as a home care worker in Philadelphia from 2007 to 2012. And that union is represented by AFSCME. So I know the power of unions, and I'm willing to stand in solidarity with not only the UAW, but union workers that are striking and fighting for economic justice. I stood in solidarity with Stop and Shop workers when they were striking in 2019. I stood in solidarity and I walked the picket lines in St. Vincent's with the Mass Nurses Association in 2021. And I'm committed to standing in solidarity with the UAW, fighting for a better job and higher pension and equal pay and fighting for the dignity of workers. So for me, I think unions, run deep in my experience, because not only my own experience as being a union member of 1199 in Philadelphia, but also standing in solidarity on the fight for 15 here in Massachusetts. That was a fight several years ago led by Raise Up, and I'm committed to doing that, and whether that's writing a letter, whether that's standing on the picket line, because I had that experience. I'm committed to standing in solidarity with the unions, because essentially that's what helped a vehicle to help protect workers' rights.
Thank you for your.
Y'all can hear me, I hope. I have to say this is a little bit of an odd thing. I actually teach in this building at times here, but I teach mathematics. The political side of me is a completely different side of me. What I want to say just as an introduction here, when I first came here, which is now 45 years ago, just to let you eat your heart out, my rent was $70 a month. That was because there was 4 housemates in the situation, which was eventually raised to 90. Some years later, I ended up buying the building, and I know somebody quoted a figure that quoted this at like $3,500 for a 1-bedroom apartment. I just wanted to show you that in my triple decker, there are 3 apartments. I live in one of them, and the other 2 are 3-bedroom apartments. The 3-bedroom apartments, the rents have never gotten that high. And I'm not the only one at Cambridge who owns 2 families and 3 families that actually maintains reasonable rents simply because we value having good tenants. You know, I think people just need to understand that. In terms of things that I've been involved in over the years, I'm still currently serve on the Central Square Advisory Committee, was involved in getting recycling started in the city. I was the compost man for probably about at least a decade. For the last quarter of the century, I've been writing the Cambridge Civic Journal. Many of you may have even learned about this event here through the Cambridge candidate pages in the calendar that I've been putting together for 20 years now. So I've been very dedicated to this. My single biggest issue for this coming year is actually the Cambridge City Charter, which is currently under review. And I especially want to be part of the city council in order to make sure that any changes to the city charter are done intelligently and wisely for the best interest of everybody in the city.
I'm sorry to break in, but that's all the time we have for introductions. Thank you so much. Our first question is about housing and housing affordability in Cambridge.
Right, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I was actually on the Envision Cambridge Advisory Committee and on the Envision Cambridge housing working group, from which it is said that the affordable housing overlay was generated. I was opposed to it then, and I'm opposed to the current revisions that are before people now. And there are a lot of reasons. First is that I simply don't believe that it's a good idea to have a subsidized housing at 4 times the high density as other market rate housing in proximity. I think that the proper way to have done this, and what I said back with the housing working group, was to have done this more as a special permit process, just like we do in Central Square, where in addition to meeting certain criteria, you're allowed to build more densely, more height, as long as you meet it, always subject to review by the planning board. All of that review process is just yanked away, so pretty much the funders of this can just do whatever they want. So I never agreed with that policy. I also feel that the only way you really get affordability when you actually look at the fact that rents are also expensive in all the surrounding towns here is you can't do it unilaterally in Cambridge. And I also really strongly believe that the only way you're ever going to get really good options for affordability is if we improve the transportation infrastructure. And that's going to take some time.
Thank you. Our next question is about policing and public safety.
I'm also not going to beat around the bush on this one. And then, you know, I've been in Cambridge a long, long time right now, and I personally know a lot of people at the Cambridge Police Department, from the commission on down, and I have pretty strong support for all of them. I'm not going to second guess everything. We'll wait till the inquest comes out about that particular Cambridge report. But for the most part, I think we've actually been doing things really, really well. And I think we've been moving in the right direction. And that may not be a popular opinion with some people, but I think that it's based on experience. By the way, in terms of the community safety department, I haven't met a Cambridge police officer who said they would appreciate having more being augmented by all these various other professionals, right? Whether that in fact translates into guaranteed safety for people who are being put out on 911 calls, I think that's something that a lot of the Cambridge police officers are very concerned about.
Thanks for your answer. Our next question is about the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge and about transit.
I now just identify myself as a person who never got a driver's license until he was 27. I grew up in New York City. So bicycling was the only way I was able to get around that in transit. And my bicycle was my primary mode of transportation during most of the years I lived there, even when I had my VW bus. You know, it was still primarily my bicycle that got me around. I would not sign a bike the bike pledge, only because I don't think that every single thing that has been rolled out as part of the bicycle safety ordinance has been done particularly well. Some of the things are very good. If I look on Hampshire Street in rush hour and I see the density of cyclists, I think there was definitely that treatment was needed. But if I see some of the other places, which were extremely low density, calm streets already, I said, why did they wreck the street? So the thing is, I think all of these implementations should be subject to some review. And signing a pledge that says I'm going to just close my eyes and cover my ears and do nothing, I can't sign a pledge like that.
Thanks for your answer. Our next question is about climate policy and the timeline for decarbonizing buildings and transit.
I think that as a goal, I agree with most of the timelines. The only difference I really have with the people who are voting on this is that I'm much more of a fan of incentives and encouragement and education than I am for hardcore mandates. I'm also pretty flexible with the idea that if you have a person working in a restaurant who wants to use a natural gas in order to do the cooking, that they should be permitted to do so, and you shouldn't need 9 politicians who tell them how they should or shouldn't be able to go and cook. You know, whatever it is they're going to be cooking in their restaurant. So I think there is a need for some flexibility in this. Honestly, you have to look for, don't sweat, I used to say, don't sweat the small stuff. There's a lot of things that you can let certain things fly as long as you're going after heating systems and big stuff. So go after the big stuff first, and then let's let some of the easy stuff go. And leave some people some flexibility and choice.
Thanks for your answer. Our final question is about support for unions and workers' rights.
All right, so in that, I'm going to deviate a little bit here. I'm not going to talk generally about unions. What I'm going to talk about is the fact that when I first came here, shortly after I came here, I was a graduate student in mathematics at MIT. And I know something of some great concerns. I think it's what inspired a lot of this notion about unionizing students, was the fact that there tends to be sometimes some abuse of that. So I'm going to speak personally to that. When I was a mathematics graduate student, I didn't figure out 2 years later that everybody else was able to work really hard on their PhD thesis, but I was actually given the responsibility of running what was called the tutored exam program for the mathematics department at MIT. Me and my office mate, Peter Greenberg, we worked hard at that. And we'll later on realize that it was completely derailing our graduate studies. You know, it worked out for me, but you know, and I brought a little thing, I'm not going to pull it out of this case here, but at MIT, they liked so much what we were doing that they gave me the award. They gave me and Peter the award for the Goodwin Medal for conspicuously effective teaching as a graduate student. When they nominated us for this, we resisted it because we felt that this was basically throwing us a bone after we had been largely abused and made it work far more than anybody else. So as an elected official, I can just tell you straight out, just out of personal experience, that I come into this with a lot of sympathy for graduate students who are basically being disproportionate burdens. And I think that, now whether that's negotiated through unionization or some other means is not that important to me. What is important is just that everybody be treated fairly.
Thank you so much for your answers. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
You're a long time public figure that you have taken controversial stance on issues, especially on social media. You guys post on Twitter trans rights, including one that calls transgenderism a pedophilic ideology. How can candidates trust you to defend the rights of all of these groups?
I actually don't remember if I took put a like or something on something I thought was funny or something. That is certainly possible, but I certainly don't remember doing anything particularly controversial in that regard.
But it wasn't just one like.
I totally agree with that.
Thanks for your answers.
Incredible. So I can just go ahead and get started.
Yes.
Okay. Amazing. Hello, everyone. My name is Ayah Al-Zubi. I'm another one of the candidates running for Cambridge City Council. I'm a new candidate in the race, and I picked the She/Her series. I want to quickly start off by combining my opening and my closing, just because I know that there haven't been closing statements or finishes. So I'll quickly say this. I'm someone who moved and immigrated to the U.S. at a young age with my family and moved around a lot growing up. I didn't have necessarily the privilege to be in a stable place. And it wasn't until I moved to Cambridge that I realized the power and felt the power of community and community building. And so that's what I got involved with, particularly with sports and education advocacy. And one thing I also want to acknowledge to you all as well is I'm a firm believer in investing in people, because when we take the time to invest in people, especially our youth, we have the opportunity to build better communities and infrastructure. So that's probably the first thing I want to share. I also want to encourage you, as you all reflect on this forum, to really grapple and think about the intentions and the whys behind all the candidates who are running for this race. And I will tell you right now that my why and why I'm running is not just to represent all Cambridge residents, but to also be specific to raising the voices of folks who are often neglected in political spaces and don't have the same level of access to political engagement. That includes folks like young people, which I'm happy to talk more about. Oh, wow, so short on time. Young folks, low income, working, union members, people of color, tenants, and as we'll get to really soon.
Great, thank you. So our first question is about rent and housing.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is probably the pressing issues you've heard from everybody, right? So it's very complicated, but it's also quite simple as well. So I'm going to break it down how I view it, especially when we're talking at a forum for graduate students in particular. Right now, there's tenants or renters, and there's also homeowners. Within those two categories, we can talk about affordable housing or nonprofit government-based mechanisms, or we can talk about the market demand or more of the capitalistic practices of housing. So one thing I want to focus on is tenant rights, because right now 2/3 of folks in Cambridge are tenants. And the fact that there's an intersectionality between the Harvard Graduate Student Union fighting for living wages and then trying to bog down with the high rising costs, we need to do a lot more to support this community. Whether it's right to counsel, whether it's, for example, emergency rental assistance program, putting on a demand that if you're going to push someone out because you're raising the rent, that you're going to pay for their transition to their new home. Really holding a high standard for those folks, because right now, the main form of homelessness is transitional homelessness. It's the folks that don't have the ability to pay off their rent, so they move into places navigating between homes and couches. Wow, that's incredibly fast. Okay. And also, when we talk about homelessness, we also need to consider chronic homelessness, because we don't invest enough in our homeless community. They are people, they're a guilty population. They're not a guilty population, they're a vulnerable one. So we need to take the time to invest more resources and opportunities for them as well.
Thank you. Next question is about policing, justice, and public safety.
Yeah, this one is near and dear to my heart as a Muslim. This one's personal because post 9/11 America, the Department of Homeland Security was made. The U.S. Patriot Act was passed. And also we have the TSA, increasing surveillance of Muslims. We understand that these systems are put in place, and for me to call them a failure is actually an excuse, because these systems were built intentionally. These systems were built, like, for example, policing was built to patrol enslaved folks back in the 18th century. If a system is broken fundamentally, we cannot expect it to continue to serve the people. Instead, we should take the time to invest in them. So whether that means, first off, we need to release the names of the police who killed and murdered Faisal as a Muslim brother. That is heartbreaking. We cannot call and be people who actually pin those people down, set double standards. Like, for example, we give the mental health crisis excuse to white folks, but we don't get the same excuse to Black and brown folks. Why is that the case? So this is something to consider. And also, I really want to take the time to acknowledge that we need to put more time and engagement to reallocating funding from the police into community organizations like PART. We cannot continue to make more city government structures like the community safety department to be able to ensure that after reform and reform and reform, there are still going to be the same broken fundamental structures that they are.
Thank you. Next question is about the bike safety pledge and biking and transportation more generally.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm talking so fast, dude. So I am someone who's signed on the bike safety pledge, and here's why. Bike infrastructure saves lives. It's that simple. And I will anecdotally share with you all that actually my bike was stolen on the night of 9/11. My campaign material ripped to pieces in front of my apartment with vulgar language on top of it. I am someone who believes that if we want to be folks that actually address road safety without forgetting pedestrians, because this is something that's come up with a lot of folks in the community. River Street, for example, cars are flying by. Elderly folks can't cross the street. So when we consider what it actually means to uphold road safety, we need to consider everyone in the conversation, including pedestrians, while also upholding that we need to push on the ordinance as well to make sure that more bike lanes are held, but also quick transfer to public transportation, because as Burhan mentioned, there is an MBTA board. There is a mayor who's elected where MBTA reaches their, has pathways in some way. And then right now, the mayor, Thomas Cobb, is someone that we can really demand and push on in terms of how we can make improvements to the MBTA. For God's sakes, you guys, Central Square to Harvard Square, I could probably climb Mount Everest at this rate before I got to Harvard Square. So we do need to continue pushing the MBTA through boards, which right now is definitely a bit trickier.
Thank you for the response. Next is a question about the city's climate policy.
Yes, okay, climate policy. We're doing a great job in Cambridge. We made a lot of progress in terms of the Green New Deal. This is great to acknowledge, especially because right now, we passed UDO, we're holding that accountability for large commercial buildings, especially over 100,000 feet. That's incredible, especially when we have places like Kendall Square. But it's also important, we need to actually sit down and talk through what it looks like for residential buildings as well, and also continue to push on those commercial developments that are below 100,000 square feet. We could do so through electrifying, which Cambridge is really pushing right now. I've gotten the brochure myself on my apartment. And I also just want to recognize that we need to invest more in renewable energy sources and allow and help renters, landlords, homeowners engage with that process so that we can help lower those emissions as well.
Thanks. The fifth and final question is about unions and workers' rights.
Absolutely. I am endorsed by the UAW. I am a proud union supporter here on campus. I did not share this at first, but I am a student who graduated recently from this university. I studied sociology and psychology. And I want to note that I'm someone who helped student organizations on campus connect with particular issues that are happening on campus, whether it's Divest Harvard, in any ways of that term for divest, and then also ethnic studies coalitions, for example, and how we can come together and build a really larger movement for how we can address corporations, institutions, and really hold them to where their money is, right? Put your money where your mouth is, put the people over the profit. And right now, in terms of Harvard, $8 million in the fiscal 2024 budget, come on, our endowment increased like billions of dollars. We could do a lot more for the city that we have historically exploited, especially Indigenous folks, especially Black folk in Cambridge.
Great, thank you. That concludes our questions. From the audience, it looks like we have one on Zoom, which is, I'll read it out. It's exciting to see young candidates like yourself run. Given that there has been talk to raise the voting age on the national level, what advice do you have to young people across Cambridge having experienced this journey?
Yeah, no, so this is actually really important because right now in the presidential campaign elections, which a lot of young folks are now pushing movement into, is that we recognize that there are folks who really want to dial down our voices as young folks. The reality is, one, we got a whole heck ton of energy. I'm someone who wants to stand up on the stage, read every single thing, and try to figure out what we can do to best engage with our community members. So what I could say to that is let's continue to show up as young folks, especially like PhD students, graduate students here at Harvard and MIT. And I want to encourage you to engage on the local and state level, because that's where a lot of reform and progress can be made. I personally believe that sometimes presidential politics can just be it's just someone running usually to be a puppet behind a bunch of strings. But when we really want to talk change, we need to run for office here on the local level and state level and show folks that we are people that you can lean in on, have conversations with, and engage with so that we can build a better community.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Ayesha Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Ayesha Wilson, and I'm running to be your city councilor, one of. So I was raised here in Cambridge. I was, my whole K-12 education has been here. I'm currently a Cambridge School Committee member, now serving in my second term, which I'm really excited about. I've been able to do a lot of great work. I am a social worker. I have my MSW and BSW from Wheelock College, and I am a mom. I'm a mom to a 15-month-old. Who, as a single mom and a single mom by choice, I really think about privilege and opportunities and really what does it look like and what does it mean to raise a child here in the city of Cambridge. My work on the school committee, I also am a product of Cambridge Housing Authority, a product of our Cambridge Public Schools, and I work for Cambridge Housing Authority right now as a senior teacher counselor, which means that I support young people from grades 8 to 12 with transitional life skills, and really supporting them and their families to meet their needs, whatever that may be, but thinking about post-secondary opportunities. As a part of the Cambridge Housing Authority, I am a union employee, Teamsters Local 122. So I do support all unions and really making sure that our city becomes a safe city, a comfortable city for working families to raise their families for generations, individuals and families to raise their families for generations.
Thanks for your introduction. Our first question is about housing and housing affordability.
Yes, so in my intro, as I said, I am a product of the Housing Authority. Not only growing up in Cambridge housing, Jefferson Park housing development, the side that's actually being torn down right now to be renovated, but I also was a Section 8 voucher holder. And I used that voucher from Cambridge Housing Authority and actually lived in Boston where it was cheaper to actually live for about 10 years before incoming out somehow, oddly, and moving back to Cambridge to become a live-in support staff for specialized housing where I support 10 residents who have intellectual disabilities. So that is now my housing. I work for my housing currently.
Thanks.
Oh, so sorry
Sorry.
to answer the question. So I am pro-housing. I want to make sure that we have more affordable housing opportunities, but I also want to think about opportunities for home ownership, right? As a mother, as a longtime Cambridge resident, I don't see the pathway for me to own a home in this great city. And as someone who has been dedicated my life to not only public service, but to this community, I just find that to be really odd and really unfortunate and just really depressing. Because I really think about how am I going to raise my son? How am I going to continue to be here in this great city? And I just don't see those pathways for myself and others who really have similar makeups to that as well.
Thanks for your answer. Our next question is about policing and public safety.
Yes, thank you for that question. Again, as someone who grew up in the city, I've seen so many of our young, my friends, neighbors, the young people that I work with today who have been, you know, traumatized, victimized by police. And I do think about how we can, I mean, there's always the need for police. And I think nationally, as we've seen, just the heartache and the trauma that has been set up by police across the city, we also recognize that here in Cambridge, we're not outside of issues and challenges that happen, but we are also doing some amazing great work. And I do want to lift that up, that our city, whether it's our YROs, our youth resource officers, our commissioner, others, that they are doing some amazing work. And I see our officers each and every day. A lot of them I actually grew up and went to school with. And so while it is harmful of the tragedies that do happen across, and it's not excusable by any means, I do think about how we implement other new programs, holistic programs like PART and others to really think about how we combat safety as a whole, because there's a lot of safety needs across our city for everyone to have work and be very busy. This city is very complex and there's a lot of need. Thank you.
Thanks for your answer. Our next question is about the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge and transit.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to start off with a short story. You know, I lost a dear friend in August of 1997, Janisa Totten, and I just want to bring her name into this space because she was hit by a car while she was riding a bike. And right now, right at the corner of Walden and Mass Ave, there's a Janisa Totten Square. And that was the last day that I rode a bicycle. Okay, because of that safety and that impact on me as someone who rode my bike from here to Mattapan as a young person. Okay, and so I do believe that bike lanes are really important to our community. And I also believe that communication and process is critically important as well. I have not signed the bike pledge. I do not intend on signing the bike pledge. But I do believe as a resident, as a neighbor, and someone who supports, again, I work with young people who their mode of transportation to and from school is by bikes. But I'm also a resident who lives right on Garden Street, who was greatly impacted by the challenge of the implementation of bike lanes and was not included in the conversation by any means. So again, it's a hard conversation to have. Our city is crazy complex with a lot of issues, but we have to do a better job of communication process. And I truly believe that my work as a collaborator and a communicator will be able to bring most marginalized voices to the table so that we can get work done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next question is about climate policy and the timeline for decarbonizing buildings and transit.
Yeah, thank you. So our city, we're doing some really amazing things. I just want to thank those current counselors who are doing that great work. And with the Budo, we being aggressive, right? And we're being intentional in the areas where we need to be. And I think we need to think about what is the phased-in approach to really rolling out Budo so that we can be effective overall. What are the incentives that we put in play when we want to make sure that our buildings, someone spoke earlier about the MIT buildings and how we can actually be more aggressive to tackling that work there. And I think we do that, and we hold those corporations who have the financial resources accountable to actually doing that work. And we work with others, right, our nonprofits, and while residentials are not included in the ordinance currently, but we also want to work towards our residential buildings and our religious buildings, because we would love, I personally would love to see all of our buildings be in a place where we're more energy safe and energy smart. So but I do understand that we're not going to be able to get to that particular goal by 2035, but I do think that it is important that we work on that over the years.
Thank you very much. And our last question is about the resolutions from City Council supporting unions and support for workers' rights.
Yes, thank you. As I started, I support unions, and I am definitely making sure and want to make sure that I'm standing in solidarity with our workers and those who, having safe working measures is just critically important. As a second generation union employee, I just know the hard work and labor, the safety that goes into the work that you do, but also having a union, a brotherhood, and sisterhood that's really supporting you, whether it's for wages, safety on the job, all of those mechanisms, it's just critically important. And we have to make sure that we have an intentional rollout plan to provide what our workers need in order to be able to live, whether it's in Cambridge or in our neighboring cities, wherever folks feel they are comfortable and safe, that we are actually providing those mechanisms and standing in solidarity with all of our union brothers and sisters. So I totally support unions, and I have been endorsed by the Greater Boston Labor Council. I've been endorsed by my own Teamster Local 122, as well as Labor's Local 151. Currently to speak, more to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answers. Does anyone in the audience have questions for Ayesha? Sorry. Yes.
Right now, our new school year has begun. Our educators still don't have a contract. We know that our students, our educators, and our community need stability in our education. As a member of the school committee, how have you met with the educators and helped get a contract that we can all be proud of?
Thank you so much for that question. And while we are in active laboring, active negotiations, excuse me, I can't obviously dive deep into anything, but my work site is in the high school. So I interface and interact with our educators every single day. Both sides, we're working towards having a fair contract. And we know that there's a lot of good things that, that we've already come to a tentative agreement on and around. We do know that there's a few more things that we need to close out. But I do believe that those who are at the table who are representing the school committee are doing everything in good faith, and that we will have a tentative agreement fairly soon. So I know that we're in this process. I know there's a lot that I can't speak to, obviously, but while we're in negotiations, we're doing everything in our power to come to the right place that's actually making safe working conditions for our educators, but also for our students as well. And I see it firsthand. Like, again, I'm in my high school, so thank you for your question.
Thank you so much for your answers. Next up is.
Hi, I'm going to watch you very closely because I always see the amount of time a lot quicker than anybody else does. So. My name is Paul Toner. I'm a current Cambridge City Councilor running for re-election. Lifelong Cambridge residents. I'm actually fortunate enough to live in my great-grandfather's house, and my children are fifth generation here. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that because I was able to buy the house from my mother back in the 90s, when, even though I thought that was kind of expensive then, things have gotten out of control today. I'm a former teacher here in Cambridge. I went to Cambridge at Somerville Public Schools, and then basically stayed in the area, for college. Taught at the old Harrington School, which is now the King Open School down Cambridge Street. Went on to law school at Suffolk University while I was teaching and stayed in education, got very involved with the union. So I became the president of the Cambridge Teachers Association. I later became the vice president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, the largest union in New England. I also served as vice president of the AFL-CIO, Massachusetts. My career has been in education. I'm known as a collaborator, someone who tries to solve problems, solutions-oriented leader. That's what I try to bring to the Cambridge City Council.
Thank you. So the first question is about rent and housing in the city.
Sure. I'm very much in support of any efforts we can make towards improving the situation for finding more, not just affordable housing, but improving the affordability situation. Because yes, I want to provide more housing for people who need subsidized housing, and folks in low income situations, but a lot of people in middle income, upper middle income can afford to live in Cambridge. So I think we need to have all the options on the table to build as much housing stock at every price point to provide more opportunities for folks to live here. I was not on the council when the original AHO got voted, so I could take the easy way out and say that I would have voted for it. I think I would have, but I wasn't there, so I'll just say that I think I would have. AHO2 right now, I actually am supportive of most of what is an AHO2. What I am not supportive of is the blanket increase in heights along the corridors. I think we need more nuance, and I think there's better ways we can go about doing that. I am supportive of a lot of the recommendations in the mayor's task force from a few years ago about improving tenants' rights and other opportunities to help support people with finding more affordable housing. I don't support putting more money, $20 million, some people are proposing, into the Affordable Housing Trust, only because I want it to stay in the city's coffers so we have flexibility. And then when we identify projects that we want to do, that we have the flexibility to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Next question is about policing and public safety.
Sure. I'll just say that I come from a family of police officers. I have 5 cousins that are Boston, Cambridge, and Holyoke police officers. I think the Cambridge Police Department does an excellent job, and I think that they're better than most. Not better than most, better than pretty much all police departments in the country. A lot of the examples I keep hearing are police departments out elsewhere or things that have happened elsewhere. Here in Cambridge, I think we have a pretty good track record of trying to meet people where they are and provide safety and good policing here in Cambridge. And one of the things that people have brought up is militarization of the police force. I don't think our police force is militarized. The equipment and the training that we do have, I've been told by both Commissioner Varg and Commissioner Elo, part of the reason we do that is if our police officers, who I think have the best interest of Cambridge residents, aren't trained to deal with certain situations, the state troopers and or the National Guard get called in for some of these things. So we want the best trained Cambridge police officers so they can work with the Cambridge community to make sure that our community is safe.
Thank you, Councilor. Next question is about the bike safety pledge, cycling and transit.
Sure. So I did not sign the bike safety pledge in 2017. I did not run in 2019, and I didn't sign it in 2021. Not because I'm anti-bike, not because I don't want people to be safe. In 2017, I didn't sign it because at that time, it was simply a pledge to have 25 miles of bike lanes. And the first question I asked the advocates when I met with me is, has anybody talked to the businesses and the residents? And the answer was no. I wasn't going to sign a blank check in 2017. In 2021, they came back with a new pledge, the pledge that is out there right now. It's better, but it also says in it that you won't change anything about the timelines or make any modifications. I think we need the flexibility to be able to implement the bike lane build out as we go through the city. Even small things, like I tried to get just a loading zone put in, and I was told, no, we can't do that. There have been some, I think, proactive, positive suggestions from Garden Street that would have helped alleviate some of the consternation of the neighbors. And I was told, no, we can't do that. And I think a majority of the city council actually supported those recommendations. So the reason I don't sign pledges is I actually want to be able to be an independent thinker and work on issues and find solutions.
Okay, thanks for the response. The next question is about BUTO and climate policy.
Yep. So on the BUTO, so there's BUTO in the beginning, and there's BUTO that passed. I supported the BUTO that passed because the original BUTO Actually, the original veto that the city came up with, I would have passed the first day. However, then some of my fellow councilors changed the deadline from 2050 to 2035. And it was an expectation that everybody would have to meet this deadline. And working with Councilor McGovern and a number of others on the council, we figured out carve-outs and made some opportunities for exemptions to help people get there and remove any penalties involved. So now the veto that we're looking at deals with Harvard, MIT, large labs, large developments. These are people who have the ability to move forward and they have the knowledge, the resources to be able to do this stuff. We will end up dealing with residential at some point, but I really want to incentivize that and provide supports for folks, not come at them with punishments.
Great, thank you. The final question is about unions and workers' rights.
Sure, I'll just be completely upfront. I voted present on the MIT graduate student resolution after I charter-rated it for a week. And I tried to work with my fellow counselors because I completely supported the ordered part about MIT sit down and negotiate and get this done. I was uncomfortable with all the whereases because quite honestly, I didn't know all the history about the various issues that were being listed there. And I really felt that it was unfair to ask us to basically, you know, charge MIT with all these things when I didn't have the information I needed to verify whether those things were true or not. So I supported the ordered, but I voted present because I did not support the whereases. Besides that, I've been a union member since I was 24 years old, working for the Cambridge teachers, the MTA. I'm not just standing with them with the unions, I led the unions. If you go back to 2010, I led a rally in the State House when they took away the rights in Wisconsin. And you can see me there with Marty Walsh and all the union leaders pushing Deval Patrick and our state legislators to stand with us. I'm very happy and proud to have at least 15 union endorsements, the Greater Boston Labor Council, the Mass Retirees, and I'm expecting a few more endorsements as well. I've always served in unions. I'm actually now a new member of SEIU 32 BJ. I have no idea what the BJ stands for because I'm now adjunct faculty at the U.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Yes.
So you mentioned your reasons for voting present on the MIT resolution, but you know, ultimately, the whereas were based on, in large part, statistics that MIT itself had released, things that were considered common knowledge. And when it comes to unions and unionization, the ability to, you know, be confident that someone will stand up to MIT and Harvard, to these huge, massive landowners and employers in Cambridge, is a really important part of expecting someone to support workers. So how can graduate workers, how can Cambridge workers be confident that you're going to stand up for union rights if, when it comes to, you know, one of the biggest employers in the city, you weren't able to fully endorse the union?
Well, I was ready and willing to fully endorse the request, the order, but I wasn't ready and willing to endorse for the whereas, which I didn't have a lot of information about. And I actually sat with my fellow counselors, asking them to make some changes. They weren't willing to make changes. So that's where it's at. Thank you.
Thank you for your
because it's my 31st wedding anniversary, and I will meet my wife.
Congratulations.
Sure.
Thank you, sorry. Well, you know, all my information is on my website, so I'm not gonna spend too much of my time talking about myself. Let me first thank Sebastian, Owen, and Clem for organizing this event, because many years ago, I'm just like one of you. I came to Cambridge from China, actually, after my bachelor degree. I came here as a graduate student. And many years later, I come back again. I appreciate the invitation. And I also wanted to speak for my fellow candidate, Peter too. I believe part of our, both of us are running for East Asian American. I really thank many Pakistanis already made the history. But you know, 18% of Cambridge residents are East Asian Americans and growing. And we have a very aloof advocate for local policies and everything. So I do want to eventually rally our East Asian Americans in Cambridge around our city policies and build our community together, right? So I also want to call on all of our students to participate like you guys did today, and you are still here. Let's make Cambridge our host city, the best community in the world. We already have best universities and best industry. And I have 15 seconds. I have another story to tell.
Oh, all right. So the next question is about housing and housing affordability.
Sure. Housing is very important. My candidacy is not about either or. My candidate is about do both. I have a lot of mileage. I borrowed somebody's language before. I traveled the world. I worked around the world. I've seen the big cities. I've seen the population growth. The campus is not an exception. We need to build taller buildings so that we don't build it to destroy our characters and our heritage. Because if we lose it, someday you will regret it. So, I wrote an op-ed in our camp today, and I said, why not we think bigger and bold? Why can't we build a John Hancock or Prudential here, which also provide a lot of the housing? And I also wrote a op-ed lately about, how do we support our work class who earn enough not to be qualified for low-income affordability application in the city? How do we support our teachers, our union workers, et cetera, I think we should think bigger and bold, and we should preserve our Howard Square, our Porter Square, our corridors. So that's my position. As an engineer, I believe we can do both, and I call on both school students to think creatively. We can solve this issue. Many cities solve this issue already.
Thank you very much. Our next question is about policing and public safety.
Sure. I spent the last 4 years in Manhattan dealing with homelessness, severely mental ill, and drug abuse issues. Every day, my not-for-profit agency in Manhattan take care of 3,500 people in Manhattan, in 5 boroughs of New York City, actually. They call our agency home. And we should support our local not-for-profit to step up to handle a lot of crises that's not related to violence, not related to public safety. I support parks. And also I support our police. I disagree we need to defund the police because we have an emergency existential threat that we will have a migrant crisis soon. Our crime is increasing. We need our police well supported to help us keep our city safe. I stay with a few minutes.
Thank you. Our next question is about the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge and transit.
Sure. Again, do both. As a balanced engineering telling you, I am a biker from birth. So when I grew up in China, I never had a motor vehicle. Anywhere I go, I bike. So I wholeheartedly support biker safety. I support we reduce the deaths and injury and accident. However, I also support we take care of our senior citizens, take care of our local businesses. If they need parking space to sustain, to just survive this economic situation, we're taking their livelihood away just to bike. Bike is not fair. So I think as a balanced engineer again, I like to find solution all together. All of our two schools, the brightest mind, fairest mind together. Let's find a solution. Let's support bikers. Let's support our citizens. Let's support our local businesses.
Thank you very much. Our next question is about climate policy and the timeline for decarbonizing transit and residential vehicles.
Right. So I support wholeheartedly the bill of disclosure clauses. I don't support rigid timeline. Here, I'll tell you why. Because I, since March to today, I reduced my energy consumption in my house by more than 60% without changing, without false electrification, without changing, moving away from gas. I believe I also support MIT continue to have the big magnets I used to do my experiments and writing my thesis in MIT when my magnet on Albany Street runs 40% of Cambridge city electricity got sucked into that machine. We need to transform the world. We are here, you are here to study, to research, to not to save energy. Let me put it this way, right? So I think there's a practical way to save energy, like I did. I installed 50 sensors in my house. I learned how to reduce my consumption by 60%. We need to support our local churches, not for profit, not to be squeezed out, and we need to support them and incentivize them and help them reduce energy consumption. But we cannot force them to convert on rigid timeline.
Thank you. Our last question is about resolutions supporting unions and workers' rights.
Sure. I first of all, teacher union. I wanted to comment on that is, I heard you still have a negotiation to write a contract with teachers who are most important to all of us. And I think we should give them more than 2.5% increase every year. I think we are losing our best and brightest teachers to surrounding towns and to surrounding states because we pay them not enough, because we don't have an affordable housing solution for them, right? So I think we should support our teachers union. We should support our local government workers because they cannot afford a lot of things here. Yet they are not qualified for low-income affordability application. We should support our teachers union. We should support our government workers. I don't know the name of the union because I used to work with PATH in New York State. So as a government workers and as a resident, I support the union wholeheartedly. I will not only support the union, but also work on the solution called workforce affordability in Cambridge.
Thank you very much for your answers. Does anyone in the audience have questions?
Yeah, I wasn't planning on asking one, but I did want just to clarify on housing. You talked about building bigger buildings and also protecting neighborhood character. And I'm wondering where you're going to put the building. You know, if you build new tall buildings in Porter Square and Harvard Square, do you view that as hurting not protecting the character?
Yeah, we don't want to build tall buildings in Harvard Square, right? Because we want to preserve Harvard Square. In Cambridge, there must be a place that's easier to build than Harvard Square or Central Square. And that place, of course, up to the civic consensus and civic engagement. We need to decide where it is, but we should be able to build the tall buildings. It is a historical plan. The population will grow. Someday, if not today, will be tomorrow. We have to count on that question. And I believe our smart minds from both schools can resolve that question, right? So, you know, across the river, there's John Hancock, there's Prudential, and all over the world, there's tall buildings. They can destroy our Harvard Square, right? So I just want to call about to do both. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for stepping in. It's tough to go towards the end. My name is Marc McGovern. I am born and raised in Cambridge. In fact, I live in the house purchased by my great-grandfather in 1918 because he was a union iron worker. I'm a social worker who has worked for 29 years with some of the most vulnerable children and families right here in Cambridge and across the state. And I'm currently serving my 5th term on the council, including 1 term as mayor. I am running for re-election because despite all the craziness around government these days, I still believe that government can be good. I still believe that we can make tangible differences in people's lives. I still believe that we can lift people up and help them reach their full potential. In Cambridge, there's a lot of folks who are really struggling to live here, right? A lot of people think, oh, everyone's doing well. Well, we have a higher poverty rate than the state average in Cambridge. When you add what it really costs to live in Cambridge, that rate is even higher. So we have to have bold leaders. My motto on my sign is bold, compassionate leadership. We can't nibble around the edges with these issues. We have to attack them aggressively and boldly. We have to be compassionate to the people we serve, and we have to lead because we have no other choice.
Sorry. Okay, I can go. Yes, please.
Okay.
Tell us about your thoughts on housing.
Sure. So, look, there are over 6,000 people who live or work in Cambridge on the Cambridge Housing Authority waiting list. That is a crisis. These are people who live and work in our community, right? And like I said before, if you have a crisis, you don't deal with it by nibbling around the edges or keeping the status quo. I was the lead sponsor on the Affordable Housing Overlay, and I'm a co-sponsor on the amendments. The overlay has produced somewhere in the developmental pipeline, they're not all built yet, 616 units of 100% affordable housing. That is going to literally change people's lives. This is a moral issue. And instead, we get caught up on, is it going to be 12 stories or 10 stories? You know, people talk about the character of the city. In terms of the physical appearance of the city, the character has changed for decades, for years. Triple deckers were once not allowed. Now they're the thing that everyone is fighting to preserve. When I think about the character of the city, I think it's not about the height of the building, but it's about the people who live in those buildings. I sit with people every day in desperate need for affordable housing. And we just can't sit there and say, well, let's kick the can down the road. They deserve affordable places to live. This is a moral.
Thank you very much. Our next question is about, yes, policing public safety.
Thank you. So after the murder of George Floyd, the council passed an ordinance asking the city to look at creating an alternative police system or department. I co-chaired the task force, worked on that issue. And we soon would be having a community safety department where social workers will respond to non-violent calls. As a social worker, I think that's great. I had a gentleman an unhoused gentleman, I live in Central Square, who knocked on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning, pouring rain outside, couldn't get into a shelter, said, can you help me? I said, well, the only thing I can do is call 911. And he said, I don't want to deal with police. And that's his right. Now we will have a different number to call. Now, instead of armed police officers coming out, we're going to have social workers come out. That's going to be great. That's going to be a game changer. In terms of the police department in general, I do think the Cambridge Police Department are far better than most other police departments, but we are not perfect. And we see that with what happened with Said. And, it doesn't matter to his family that the Cambridge Police Department, is nationally known. They lost their son. And no parent should ever have to bury a son. So we have to continue to get better and continue to, look at ourselves in the mirror.
Thanks for your answer. Our next question is about the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge and transit.
Yeah. So I signed the pledge. The pledge doesn't say that we'll never make any changes. The pledge says that you won't extend the timeline and you won't weaken it. Okay, and I believe in that. Jivan, who had to take off, was the lead sponsor on the second version of the cycle safety ordinance. I was the lead sponsor on the first, and I stand by that. I sat when Amanda Phillips was killed in Union Square. I sat with her parents, right? 2 weeks after she was doored and killed, my son was doored and fell into the street just a few blocks from where she was killed. Thank God there wasn't a truck coming as there was in her case. So, we have to, I understand that it means our streets just aren't wide enough to do all the things that we want to do. So I understand by installing dedicated bike lanes, for parking and other things, we have to reimagine how we use our streets. Our streets weren't always about cars, right? And we're at a time now where we have to think about how are we going to reimagine our street usage. There's multiple modes of transportation, but ultimately, I want people from 8 to 80 to be able to get around this city safely. And I think the cycle safety ordinance does that. And I make no apologies for that.
Thanks for your answer. Our next question is about decarbonization and climate policy.
So I voted for Guido. I voted for green roofs. I voted for the stretch code. My house is electric. I put heat pumps in my house, so I'm trying to move that example. In terms of the big picture, there's a quote, I'm blanking on who said it. It says, humans didn't evolve from the Stone Age because we ran out of rocks. We evolved from the Stone Age because technology got better. We have to invest in technology. There's great work being done at the Engine, which is a building in Central Square where there are small labs that are working on state-of-the-art technology to address climate change and get us away from fossil fuels. So we have to be willing to not only pass these policies and put these timelines in and put these requirements in, but we also have to make sure we're investing in technology because that is really what's going to solve the problem.
Thank you. Our final question is on resolutions supporting unions and workers' rights.
Yeah. So I have been with the Harvard Graduate Student Union from the very start and with MIT as well. I have spoken at rallies, I have met the people in Harvard leadership. As I said, my great grandfather was a union iron worker. I am grateful for every time I go home because I couldn't afford to live in Cambridge if he didn't buy that house. I didn't earn it. I'm privileged. That's why I fight for the things that I fight for, because I know other people aren't. And unions have protected my family. When I was my first term on the city council, I worked with United Here, Local 26, with the Harvard-owned DoubleTree Hotel across the river. And the housekeeping staff was trying to unionize. The management company was blocking it. And Harvard's position was, hey, we just own the building. We don't manage it. And I said, well, you own the building, you hire the management company, you have a responsibility. I fought them on that. We won that fight, and those housekeepers are unionized now. So it's not just about resolutions, but it's about actually engaging and getting in the fight. I think I bring that to the council on a lot of different issues. We can talk all day about the importance of housing. We can talk all day about the importance of climate change. You have to be, the question should be, how are you going to vote for it? Because we could talk forever about it. Are you going to be a councilor who's willing to put yourself out there to actually fight for it and back it up?
Thank you so much for your answers, Councilor McGovern. Are there any questions from the audience?
Those are the quickest answers I've ever given. I didn't get the hook once.
So we have a question from the Zoom chat. Someone is asking if you accept money from developers.
Some developers. I don't think all developers are evil. Okay? I think you look at Biomed, who is a great community partner. I don't mind being supported by folks from Biomed. I don't accept contributions from Boston Properties because I actually don't think Boston Properties is a great community partner, right? This whole thing that, developers are evil, people have to build stuff, right? And developers build stuff. The question is, when Massa Main was being built in Central Square, they wanted 12% affordable housing, which was higher than what they were supposed to be allowed to do legally. I fought them to get 20%. It was a 20% project in the city. It cost them tens of millions of dollars. You think they were happy with me? No. I do hold developers accountable, but that doesn't mean I'm not willing to work with them.
Thanks so much for your answers, Councilor.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Frantz Pierre. I'm Haitian. I could be the first Haitian city councilman in the city, so that's history. I'm the first gentleman to actually run for city council and school committee at the same time, so that's history. I'm a social worker at heart. I'm the youngest of 12 siblings. I'm the youngest boy. I worked at the area 4U center since I was 12 years old. I'm a social worker at heart, so I'll just run down some of my resume. I've been a mental health specialist, a care coordinator for the elderly residents from evictions, a housing specialist, DYS worker, residential worker. I pretty much did everything under the sun. I'm a people person. My slogan, my campaign is the people's campaign. Every day, anywhere I'm at, I'm usually helping people. So, what do you want?
Thank you. Would you mind telling us your views on housing and housing affordability? Yes, I'm for housing. Because if it wasn't for housing, I wouldn't be able to be here in Cambridge, of course, right? So that's big. There's definitely some things we can work on housing, right? I think we can add programs where we can help people not help people get unstuck. I feel like, and also the percentage rate I believe is too high. I think we're being taxed too much on many fronts. So 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, it's way too much. Especially, dealing with people that are raising kids in the city. And growing up in the city, of course, it looks like the numbers are actually going down for housing where you can't get a 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom unit. So that's another thing that is big that I'm absolutely trying to bring to the council. I would also love to build new state-of-the-art facilities for the elderly, of course. I think it's mind-boggling for me to see how we're treating the youth and the elderly. In Europe, there's a program where they house the students and the elderly together. And on many fronts, I think that could be very helpful on many fronts for the elderly and the youth. I think they can get the mentorship from the elderly,
and then they can get the energy from the youth, of course, right? So I just think, I would like to bring a partnership or a union within the old and the new. I mean, the old and the young. I think that's where the disconnection is. But in reality, you know, y'all are our fathers and our grandfathers, and we are your kids. So I think it's time to actually give the kids the torch and actually trust them.
Thank you. Our next question is about policing and public safety.
Yes, I'm for police. I'm not for defunding the police. Where I'm from, to defund the police will make it very, very hectic, right? And I think it's for anybody. It doesn't matter what color, what creed, right? I think if you're hungry, you're hungry. I think we need to get our kids and the people in the situation that they are out of survival mode. I think once they're in survival mode, you can't think, you can't process, right? I can tell you that there's $1 million around the corner, but if you're in survival mode, all you're thinking about is eating, right? So I think that's the big part. You gotta get people out of that survival mode and get people actually living.
Thank you. Our next question is about the Cambridge Bike Safety Pledge and about public transit.
So 2 years ago, I didn't sign it. This year I was gonna sign it. For many reasons, of course, I'm big on safety, of course, right? But I wasn't gonna sign it because I'm like completely all the way for what they were saying, of course, right? It's more of a yes and a no, or a no and a yes type of thing. And also trying to educate the population on what's going on in the city. And my big thing on pledges and things like that is that people are not actually receiving or getting that information at a proper time or in the right manner. So they're actually either left out and these things are being passed and they don't, you know, it's too late to actually do anything about it. And I think me being that new fresh energy, I think I can actually get the people, you know, the people around to start learning about what's going on in the community.
Thank you for your answer. Our next question is about climate policy and the timeline for decarbonization.
With the climate policy, I'm for it as well. And how I see that is, like I said, anything for the people I'm trying to do as soon as possible. I don't believe we should wait for it to be on our doorsteps to actually for us to move fast. And I think, you know, with the way politics is, it's almost like, you know, it's a game, right? I guess when I first entered, you know, the question that they asked me is, who do you come in and knock off? I think that's the wrong way, the way politics is being done. I think right now it's almost like we work for the politicians, right? But I think it's really supposed to be we work for you. And I think that's what I'm really trying to bring back to the table, where it's not what I want, it's actually I petition what y'all want and give y'all what y'all want and fight to the death of that.
Thank you. Our last question is about unions and workers' rights.
I'm big on unions. To me, a union is like a family, right? I feel like it's like an extra crutch, right? And I think everybody needs that. If you lack from knowing something or being abused or need help in anything, I think anything union can help you grow, right? If you have somebody that is an auto mechanic, right, and they're in your family, that helps. So I think anything unionized, I am for completely.
Thanks very much for your answers. Are there any questions from the audience? Hearing none. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's also my birthday.
I'm sorry I'm not able to attend the forum this evening. I'm traveling for work, but I'm happy I can join via video tonight. Now I'll start by sharing briefly what experiences have shaped me into the person I am and how they will influence my candidacy. My platform includes transparency, accountability, and public safety. All three have been integrated into my life from a young age. Now I'll start with safety and why it's important to me. Internationally, every time we moved, we would meet with the regional security officer at the embassy to strategize safety. We use these strategies during evacuation from severe civil unrest, medical issues, and crime prevention. And we say you have to know the risk to avoid the risk. And being proactive, prepared, and protected is what kept us safe no matter where we were in the world. Now, after 12 years of living and working abroad, both in Europe and Asia, I took the training that I received from the State Department and the RSO, and I founded a small safety security business that's certified women-owned. I deliver risk assessments, individual threat assessment plans, safety briefings, and I've developed on-demand safety programs for students and employees for a nonprofit. Now, I've worked on legislation here in Massachusetts to bring transparency, accountability, and safety for students. Also, I wrote a safety book to highlight these issues that were covered in the legislation that I've been working on. I hope this gives you a bit of background on why I focus on safety. But this brings me to an unacceptable issue here in Cambridge: the rise of violent crime, the overdose epidemic, our homelessness, and mental health issues. Our community safety requires a collaborative, strategic plan, and I know we can do better, and I would like to help. I'd also like to touch on a few topics that I know you're going to be covering this evening. First, housing. I look at housing from a unique perspective because I've lived in some of the most diverse, densely populated, and expensive locations in the world. That would be Milan, Rome, Bangkok, and San Diego. Each of these cities struggle with parking, with homelessness, affordability. I'd like to see housing added here to Cambridge to enhance our neighborhoods. I want setbacks so we can add trees, and it's important to preserve our history and unique characteristics of Cambridge. Policing. I fully support our first responders, and I want to make sure they have the best training and resources. As a victim advocate, I know when somebody is in need of officer assistance, we want an officer that has the needed strategic tools and techniques to help. Collaborating with partners to ensure the community is fully served is a welcomed idea. Cycling and transit. I look at communities around the world and I know we can do a better job of rolling out our bike lanes in a way that doesn't hurt businesses. We need to look at innovative ways to keep bikers, pedestrians, and drivers safer. As for transit, I was talking with a woman who for the last 20 years had been taking public transportation from Owllife to MGH. Her trip was usually 45 minutes. Now it's an hour and a half. She's thinking about driving now. That's horrible. We have to address the mass transit infrastructure and make sure that public transportation is enticing to riders. That means better and faster and safer. Climate. I want a cleaner, greener, safer community, and I know you guys do too. We need to continue our pursuit of climate resiliencies and our goals with our community members and involve them with incentives, not forcing. And lastly, labor unions. And they advocate for workplace safety, and of course, I'm a big fan of safety. I'm looking forward to meeting with a few union groups in the next few weeks. So in closing, I have to say, people are mad. I'm constantly getting calls from business owners and community members who are upset about the lack of community engagement, feeling that their voices are unheard. Now, my priority would be setting up a better way to communicate what the council is doing and not be rushed into creating policy orders until every question is answered. And too many times I see the council members ask questions, but because of timeframes, they went on without the answers. Now, this way of conducting business can lead to unintended consequences. But what we ought to be looking for and seeking is our intended outcomes in every single thing we do. Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you back in Cambridge when I'm back in town.
Great.